Welcome to Auto News Talk. Usually when you hear the phrase stress test, it kind of implies this highly controlled laboratory environment.
Right.
Like an engineer applying a calculated amount of pressure to a steel beam just to see exactly where it bends.
Right, yeah. It's clean, it's measurable.
Exactly. But looking across the massive stack of industry data we are sorting through for this segment, from international trade reports to dealership software analytics and, automotive engineering headlines, well, that controlled environment is completely shattered right now.
Oh, absolutely. It is volatile, to put it mildly.
Yeah, and so our mission for this segment is to map out exactly where the automotive industry is cracking under this pressure and where it is basically being forced to evolve. Because right now, if you look at it, automakers and dealers are simultaneously battling geopolitical trade threats, absolutely bizarre consumer behavior, and rapid technological leaps all at the exact same time.
We really are. And, we tend to view the car industry as this straightforward assembly line, but it actually operates much more like a fragile, highly reactive ecosystem.
Right.
So if you alter a single variable at the macro level, say a dispute over cross-border taxation, the resulting shockwave dictates what happens on a local dealership lot. It influences how a shopper interacts with a website, and it ultimately alters the physical buttons a driver touches inside the cabin.
And that cause and effect chain is exactly what we need to trace for you today, or, well, for this segment. Starting with the most immediate threat to the industry's stability, which is the cost of manufacturing.
Yeah, that's the big one.
Right. So an analysis covering global policy impacts outlines a situation that functions essentially as an inflation bomb. It's from a report called Proposed 50% Canada Auto Tariff Could Raise Costs Across U.S. Dealer Lots. And the central insight is that the United States has threatened to impose massive 50% tariffs on Canadian-built vehicles, auto parts, and steel following the collapse of trade negotiations.
Yeah, and to really grasp the severity of that threat, we kind of have to establish the baseline first. The current nominal tariff rate sits at 25%.
Okay, so they are threatening to double it.
Exactly. Doubling that to 50% represents a staggering financial cliff.
Yeah.
And the mechanics of how these talks broke down are particularly revealing, I think.
How so?
Well, according to the reporting, U.S. negotiators shifted their position very late in the process. They specifically demanded that medium and heavy-duty trucks be excluded from tariff relief.
Oh, wow. Just at the last minute.
Yeah. That last-minute pivot, combined with a refusal to exempt Canadian auto parts, is really what caused the entire framework to collapse.
And the rhetoric surrounding that collapse is intense, like far beyond typical diplomatic phrasing. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney provided a very specific justification for walking away from the table in that report.
Right, he was very blunt.
Extremely blunt. He stated flatly that they, quote, were not prepared to compromise Canada's sovereignty or to undermine our key industries. I mean, you do not deploy the word sovereignty in a trade dispute unless you view the terms as an existential threat to your economy.
You really don't. And that language reflects the reality of cross-border manufacturing. I mean, think of a modern vehicle, less like a static product built in one building, and more like a biological organism with its DNA scattered across a continent.
Right.
So a single component, like a wiring harness or maybe a steering column, it might cross the U.S. and Canadian borders 6 or 7 times during different phases of stamping, machining, and final assembly.
That is wild.
So if you apply a 50% tariff at every one of those checkpoints, the cost doesn't just add up. It compounds exponentially.
It's basically like baking a cake. Even if the actual cake is baked in the U.S., if the Canadian flour and sugar suddenly cost double, well, the price of the whole cake skyrockets.
That is a perfect analogy. And if you follow that logic, the automakers are backed into a serious corner here. They cannot simply absorb that compounded cost without destroying their profit margins.
Right. And they can't exactly uproot entrenched supply chains overnight either.
No, absolutely not. So the only release valve is the consumer. But automakers know they can't just slap a $10,000 price hike on a window sticker and expect people to pay it.
So what do? Hide it.
Yeah, exactly. They will have to hide the inflation. They will strip out standard features, or they will push consumers into, 84 or 96-month loan terms just to maintain the illusion of an affordable monthly payment.
Which is terrifying for the average buyer. But I do want to point out a limitation of this policy report. It actually doesn't identify exactly which specific vehicle models will be hit hardest by these potential tariffs.
Right. It leaves a massive cloud of uncertainty hanging over the whole market.
It really does, but you raise the crucial point. When those compounded manufacturing costs inevitably hit the showroom floor, They collide with a consumer base that is already stretched to its absolute financial limit.
Yeah, and that creates an incredibly volatile situation for the dealerships that are actually tasked with selling these vehicles.
Exactly. So if we track the impact down to the retail level, there's another industry analysis that focuses on dealership operations. It's titled, Dealers Face Selective Demand as Sales Rebound, but Aged Inventory Persists. And it reveals this fascinating contradiction in how consumers are behaving right now.
The data there is really something.
It is. On paper, the data shows a very healthy 14% rebound in new vehicle sales, which is aided by stable transaction prices. But beneath that surface-level recovery, dealers are facing this hidden crisis of hyper-selective demand.
Right. The illusion of that 14% bump masks the reality of what is actually sitting out there on the asphalt. The report points out that despite the overall sales increase, nearly half of all new vehicle inventory is considered aged inventory.
Wait, half? Half of the cars are just sitting there.
Just sitting there depreciating. And to force these vehicles off the lot, incentives are creeping back up. They are now appearing on 29% of new vehicle sales.
The hyperselectivity is the fascinating part to me. Buyers are aggressively pivoting toward hybrids for fuel efficiency. And, they are seeking out used electric vehicles as those price points finally become manageable.
Right. They know exactly what they want.
Exactly. And if a vehicle does not perfectly match those criteria, it is essentially ignored. There is a metric in this dealership data that illustrates this perfectly. 53% of new vehicle listings and 44% of used vehicle listings get exactly 0 vehicle detail page views on an average day.
0.
Nobody is even clicking on them. 0 views.
I mean, 0 page views is a terrifying metric for a business that is carrying millions of dollars in floor plan debt.
Oh, absolutely.
If we look at the mechanics of online car shopping, this happens because of algorithmic filtering.
Right.
Shoppers are setting hard, uncompromising digital filters. They want a specific hybrid trim, strictly under $40,000, with a specific interior.
So if a dealer's vehicle is priced even like $500 too high?
Exactly. Or if it lacks that specific hybrid powertrain, it falls outside the search parameters completely. It just becomes digitally invisible.
It is the equivalent of building a massive, fully stocked glass showroom and then just forgetting to turn the lights on for half the cars. The consumer never even sees them.
That's exactly what is happening. And the clear implication here is that dealers have to abandon their traditional lagging indicators.
Right.
Like relying on a 45 or 60-day aging report to spot trouble. That is a recipe for bankruptcy right now. Survival requires shifting to early digital indicators, monitoring page views and merchandising quality so they can adjust pricing before the car ever hits that dangerous age threshold.
That makes total sense. Though we should note a frustrating limitation of this dealership data. It doesn't specify exactly which brands or models are the ones sitting entirely unseen online. We just know that digital invisibility is a widespread structural issue.
Yeah, it's a blind spot in the data.
So the natural question is, how do dealerships solve a problem they barely see? And the answer they are exploring is artificial intelligence. But they are proceeding with a surprising amount of caution.
Caution is definitely the operative word there. The National Automobile Dealers Association actually dug into this. The NADI podcast examines which AI tools matter most for dealerships, is a really revealing source here.
Yeah, that was the dealer-driven podcast, right?
Exactly. They featured Steve Greenfield, who was outlining which AI tools actually matter for franchise dealerships. And the central theme of that discussion was aggressively separating actual measurable business value from, well, pure Silicon Valley hype.
Which is a very necessary distinction in this industry.
Oh, absolutely. The NADA guidance emphasizes that achieving real utility from AI does not mean buying flashy theoretical hardware or investing in vague, overarching employee training. It is about deploying AI for highly practical, honestly mundane applications. Well, they highlight using AI for lead handling, specifically tracking a shopper's digital intent, and improving employee productivity by automating data entry so the sales staff can actually focus on the human interaction.
The most compelling use case Greenfield highlighted in that source had nothing to do with sales at all. Dealerships are looking at using AI for compliance.
Yes, the compliance side is huge.
They are applying it to manage the immense regulatory burden surrounding consumer data privacy, advertising rules, and financing disclosures.
And that makes perfect sense when you consider the financial risks hidden in the finance and insurance office. Dealerships process immense volumes of highly sensitive financial data. I mean, a single deal jacket can be 100 pages long.
Oh, at least.
Right. So if a human finance manager misses one required signature, or if an annual percentage rate disclosure is calculated slightly out of bounds, that dealership faces crippling fines from federal regulators.
It can wipe out months of profit.
Exactly. So using AI to instantaneously scan thousands of documents for compliance errors before the deal is funded, that provides a massive, quantifiable return on investment.
It certainly proves that the most valuable AI is often the most boring. But the implication NADA points out is that dealerships are trapped in this precarious balancing act.
How so?
Well, as consumers increasingly use their own AI tools to research vehicles and negotiate, the balance of information shifts. Dealers must react. But if they move too fast and buy the wrong software suite, they waste millions. If they move too slow, they lose their competitive edge entirely.
Finding that exact right pace is the real challenge. Though, a major limitation of the NADA announcement is that it keeps the guidance strictly conceptual. It frustratingly avoids naming any specific AI vendors, proven products, or software systems. So it kind of leads dealers to navigate the vendor landscape completely blind.
Yeah, it's a lot of trial and error for them right now. And while the dealers are on the ground trying to use AI to sell invisible inventory, the automakers themselves are scrambling to figure out what vehicles to actually build.
Their product strategies are all over the place.
It feels incredibly fractured. A rolling news index called Latest Auto Industry Headlines cover new models, recalls, and market trends captures this tension perfectly. Because their headlines show an industry trying to manage aging internal combustion platforms while simultaneously rushing entry-level electric vehicles to market.
The legacy burden on these automakers is just staggering, particularly regarding safety and quality control. Like the headlines highlight a National Highway Traffic Safety Administration probe into General Motors over V8 engine failures.
Right.
But the sheer scale of the liability tied to these older platforms is best illustrated by a recall from Ram. They had to recall 1.2 million 1500 series pickups just for a software issue related to the seatbelts.
Wait, over 1 million trucks for a seatbelt issue?
1.2 million.
Yeah, that is insane. But it makes sense when you build on a platform at that massive scale, a single engineering flaw becomes an astronomical financial liability. Yet, while they are fighting those fires, the exact same companies are desperately pushing for affordability. The news index notes that Ford is developing a $25,000 SUV as an entry-level model, and they are pushing a cheaper EV truck.
They're essentially trying to use the massive profits from those aging internal combustion engines to fund the research and development for the electric future.
Right.
But to free up more capital for that transition, they have to aggressively simplify. The headlines mention Genesis dropping the 3.3T V6 engine from the G70 lineup, and that is not just about emissions compliance. It is really about reducing manufacturing complexity.
Because every engine adds overhead.
Exactly. Every unique engine pairing requires dedicated assembly line space, separate crash testing, unique parts inventory. Killing the V6 saves cash that can be redirected right to EV development.
But here is the friction in that strategy. At the exact same time they are preaching simplification and affordable EVs, they are fiercely catering to the high-end enthusiast market.
Oh, they definitely are.
Like, the index highlights Porsche returning the manual gearbox to the 911 Carrera S, a move that requires bespoke engineering just for purists. So you have Ford championing a $25,000 efficient EV, while the broader industry still celebrates a 1,000-horsepower V8 performance truck. It's a total split personality.
It does look like a massive contradiction. And the implication there is that automakers are terrified of abandoning their highly profitable enthusiast base before the EV market fully matures.
Yeah.
They're trying to straddle two entirely different eras of automotive history simultaneously.
Which has to be exhausting.
It is. However, a limitation of relying on a rolling news index like this is that it provides the intent without the execution. Like we see the headline for Ford's $25,000 SUV, but the index leaves open massive questions about the actual battery specifications, the range, and the realistic launch timing.
And battery specifications dictate everything about the future of this industry, which actually brings us to our final layer. Once the supply chain is settled, the dealer finds a buyer, and the product strategy is executed. What does the physical interaction with the vehicle actually feel like for you, the driver?
The in-cabin experience.
Yes, because an industry report called BMW defends touch-first interiors as trade fight and Taycan lineup cuts make headlines points to a massive debate about the dashboard. specifically regarding the screens we interact with.
This is essentially the war over the dashboard. The report details how BMW is aggressively defending a complete shift to touch-first and voice-based controls for its upcoming new class generation of vehicles.
Right.
What makes this so controversial is that BMW is doubling down on glass screens right as a growing portion of the industry, and numerous safety advocates are demanding a return to physical buttons.
And the mechanics of that safety argument are entirely based on cognitive load and proprioception. Like when you have a physical dial for the climate control, muscle memory allows you to reach down, feel the ridges of the dial, and adjust the temperature without ever taking your eyes off the highway.
Right, you just know where it is.
Exactly. But when you replace that dial with a flat piece of glass, you completely remove the tactile feedback. The driver is forced to look down at the screen to ensure their finger is hitting the exact correct pixel.
Exactly, and yet BMW's leadership completely dismisses that concern. The report includes a fascinating justification from Vikram Pawar, the CEO of BMW Group Australia. He argued that younger buyers specifically want this touch-first environment because they are entirely accustomed to smartphones, voice assistants, and constant multitasking.
I really have to challenge the core logic of that defense. The ability of a consumer to comfortably multitask on a smartphone while sitting on a couch does not magically translate to safely operating a 2-ton machine at 70 miles per hour in the rain.
No, it really doesn't.
Navigating a nested software menu just to turn on the windshield wipers requires a level of visual distraction that fundamentally contradicts safe driving principles.
It's a massive gamble on their part. The implication is that automakers are prioritizing software-driven, smartphone-like aesthetics over traditional automotive ergonomics. They believe the digital experience sells cars better than tactile functionality.
Even if it's less safe.
Apparently. And they're pushing this digital evolution alongside rapid advancements in EV adoption. Like, the same market report notes that EV adoption in Europe is surging, accounting for 1 in 4 new vehicles sold. France even hit 35%, driven largely by a government leasing program aimed at making EVs affordable for lower-income buyers. And Porsche is even cutting variants of the Taycan to simplify production and focus on what sells.
Well, that structural push for EV adoption requires better underlying technology, too, which the report also touches on. It mentions Geely stating their next-generation solid-state battery could reach 500 watt-hours per kilogram.
Which is a huge number.
Right. And to translate that engineering metric into human impact, reaching 500 watt-hours per kilogram essentially means you can double the driving range of the vehicle without adding any extra weight to the battery pack.
Wow.
Or you keep the current range, but cut the battery weight in half, which completely solves the massive issue of heavy EVs destroying tires and roads.
That technological leap would fundamentally alter the product strategies we just discussed. However, we must acknowledge a critical limitation explicitly stated in the report. Geely's metric is strictly a company-stated target. It is not an independently verified production benchmark.
Right. Promises.
Exactly. The industry has a long history of over-promising battery breakthroughs that completely fail to scale in mass manufacturing.
That is very true. You know, looking at all these moving pieces, from the Canadian border tariffs to the BMW dashboard, some very clear themes start to emerge across all these sources.
They really do.
It feels like the ultimate bottleneck for this entire industry is the desperate pursuit of affordability. We see Ford frantically trying to engineer a $25,000 SUV in the Car and Driver headlines. We see France utilizing low-income leasing to force EV adoption to 35% in that Market Insights report. And the dealership data proves that everyday consumers are pivoting heavily to used EVs and hybrids just to find a monthly payment they can survive.
Affordability is absolutely the dominant force shaping consumer behavior right now. And running parallel to that is a second distinct theme, the necessity of managing completely hidden risks.
Yes, the invisible stuff.
Exactly. Dealerships are desperately hunting for unseen inventory, sitting with 0 page views, according to that sales rebound report. The NAD podcast highlights the need for AI to manage invisible compliance risks buried in finance paperwork. And the News Index shows legacy automakers managing massive, hidden engineering liabilities, perfectly illustrated by Ram's 1.2 million vehicle seatbelt recall. The dangers threatening the industry are just no longer obvious on the surface.
And I think the third theme tying this all together is the absolute digital takeover of both retail and driving. BMW's insistence on touch-first interiors shows the complete digitization of the physical cabin, while the NAA guidance shows dealerships relying on AI to digitally track shopper intent long before a customer ever steps onto the physical asphalt.
Those themes are undeniable, but they're also generating massive internal friction and tension. The industry is essentially pulling in opposite directions.
Right, like with the screens.
Yes, you have BMW aggressively pushing touchscreens and voice controls, which directly contradicts the safety advocates and rival automakers actively returning to physical tactile controls. It is a fundamental disagreement on how humans and machines should even interact.
And an even bigger tension exists on the financial side. You have automakers frantically trying to engineer these affordable $25,000 entry-level vehicles, but simultaneously you have the looming threat of 50% tariffs on Canadian parts and steel.
Right.
If those compounded supply chain costs hit, they instantly obliterate the margins on those entry-level vehicles. I mean, you cannot build a cheap car if the foundational materials suddenly cost a fortune.
It creates an impossible math problem for the manufacturers. So, what is the practical takeaway from synthesizing all this chaos? The real so what here is that the era of relying on lagging indicators is definitively over.
It's done.
Completely done. Whether you are a dealership waiting for a 60-day aging report to tell you a car is a financial liability, or you're an automaker waiting for a trade deal to formally collapse before adjusting your supply chain survival now requires acting on early digital signals. You have to react to the zero-page views, the AI intent data, and the tariff threats before the risk mathematically compounds into a full-blown crisis.
You have been listening to Auto News Talk. It is truly remarkable to step back and realize how this industry is trying to construct a highly digitized, battery-powered future while constantly fighting the heavy, expensive ghosts of its past, whether that is legacy supply chains, massive V8 recalls, or international trade borders.
It really is. Every single technological or digital solution they implement seems to introduce an entirely new physical or financial vulnerability into the ecosystem.
It's a never-ending cycle. So we will leave you with this question to monitor as you navigate this highly reactive market. The next time you are looking at a car online, scrolling through those digital listings, ask yourself, are you studying the car or is the dealer's AI studying you? Thanks for joining us on Auto News Talk, and we will catch you on the next one.